On January 8, 1815, a British general named Edward Pakenham stood on the muddy banks of the Mississippi River, looking through his brass spyglass. Behind him stood nearly 8,000 veterans of the Napoleonic Wars, the absolute elite of the British Empire, men who had just defeated Napoleon Bonaparte in Europe. Their target was a chaotic, dug-in line of defense protecting the crown jewel of American commerce, New Orleans. Pakenham expected a quick, decisive rout, a formal display of European military supremacy over a young, fractured republic. What he marched his men into instead was a beautifully engineered slaughterhouse. Within 25 minutes, Pakenham would be dead, his army completely shattered, and the man who orchestrated the defense, a self-taught frontier general with a bullet lodged in his chest and a deep, burning hatred for the British Empire, would deliver a masterclass in defensive warfare. So how did a ragged army of frontier hunters, city volunteers, freed slaves, and literal pirates manage to annihilate the world's most formidable army in under half an hour? By late 1814, the United States was on the verge of losing the War of 1812. The British had already marched into Washington, D.C. and burned the White House to the ground. Now, London turned its gaze to the American South. If they could capture New Orleans, they would control the mouth of the Mississippi River, effectively choking the entire American economy and splitting the young nation permanently. To stop them, the U.S. government turned to a man whose entire life read like a catalog of violence, Major General Andrew Jackson. Jackson was not a textbook general. He was an orphan of the American Revolution. As a 13-year-old boy, he had been captured by the British, and when he refused to clean a British officer's boots, the officer slashed him across the face with a sword. The scar marked his face for life. The hatred marked his soul. By 1814, Jackson was a walking ghost. He was emaciated, suffering from chronic dysentery, and carried a lead bullet next to his heart from a past dueling shootout. But Jackson possessed something far more dangerous than a formal military education: an iron, unyielding will and a profound understanding of the psychological makeup of the American frontiersman. When Jackson arrived in New Orleans, he found an absolute logistical nightmare. There was no army to speak of. Instead, he had to build one out of whatever he could find. His ranks filled out with Tennessee sharpshooters in regular civilian clothes, local French-speaking city militias, freed black battalions, and, in a desperate move, a notorious syndicate of Caribbean pirates led by Jean Lafitte. To any traditional European strategist, this was not an army. It was a mob. Asking them to trade volleys in an open field with British regulars was suicide, and Jackson knew it. Instead of attacking, Jackson retreated to a narrow strip of land 5 miles below the city, known as the Chalmette plantation. His officers were highly skeptical. The position was cramped, but Jackson saw the lethal geometry of the landscape. To his right sat the massive, uncrossable Mississippi River. To his left lay an impenetrable, alligator-infested cypress swamp. The British could not flank him. They had no choice but to attack him head-on through a narrow, open corridor of mud just 1,000 yards wide. Jackson set his mob to work. For days, they dug a massive 4-foot-deep canal stretching from the river to the swamp, the Rodriguez Canal. They piled the excavated mud into a massive earthworks wall, reinforced with wooden fence posts and cotton bales. But Jackson did not just build a wall, he built a trap. He meticulously placed his artillery, including heavy long-range naval cannons provided by Lafitte's pirates, at precise angles along the mud wall. Every single square inch of the open field in front of him was carefully mapped out into overlapping crossfires of grapeshot and cannonballs. Jackson spent the night before the battle walking the length of the mud wall, chewing tobacco, coughing up blood, and personally speaking to every disparate faction of his army. He told the pirates exactly which British columns to target. He told the Tennessee riflemen to hold their fire until they could see the brass belt buckles of the redcoats. By dawn, every man behind that mud wall understood their singular, specific role in the machinery of destruction. If you are learning something from this tactical breakdown, take a quick second and hit subscribe. We cover military history and forgotten strategy like this every single week, and you definitely will not want to miss our next episode. Now, picture this from General Pakenham's perspective. He was an aristocrat, highly decorated, and completely steeped in the absolute conviction that British discipline could shatter any irregular force through sheer intimidation and a bayonet charge. To him, Jackson's mud wall was an amateur obstacle. and the men behind it were undisciplined cowards who would break and run the moment the British line advanced with fixed bayonets. On the morning of January 8th, a thick, heavy fog rolled off the Mississippi River, blanketing the field in a ghostly gray shroud. Pakenham ordered a massive multi-column frontal assault. He pushed his men forward across the frozen, muddy plantation fields. But in his reckless haste, Pakenham made a series of fatal, arrogant errors. He failed to conduct proper reconnaissance. Worse, the regiment assigned to carry the heavy wooden ladders and bundles of sugarcane needed to fill Jackson's canal and scale the mud wall completely forgot their equipment in the rear. Yet, Pakenham refused to halt the advance. He ordered his men forward into the fog, blind, without ladders, believing his regulars could simply overwhelm the Americans through raw courage. As the British columns closed within 500 yards, the morning sun broke through the fog, instantly burning it away. The British regulars suddenly found themselves completely exposed in an open, muddy field, staring directly at Jackson's wall. Jackson gave the order. The American line erupted. The heavy pirate cannons fired first, tearing massive, horrifying lanes through the tightly packed British columns with solid iron shot. Pakenham's men closed the gaps, marching forward with icy, disciplined precision through the mud. At 150 yards, the Tennessee and Kentucky frontier riflemen opened fire. These were long-range hunting rifles, not standard military muskets. They picked off British officers from their horses with terrifying accuracy. A captain dropped, a colonel fell. The British advance dissolved into pure chaos. They reached the edge of the Rodriguez Canal, only to find themselves trapped in a massive crossfire with no ladders to scale the mud wall. They were stuck in a wide-open kill zone, unable to move forward and forbidden from retreating. Pakenham rode forward into the storm of lead, desperately trying to rally his panicked men. A piece of grape shot shattered his knee. Seconds later, a rifle ball tore through his spine, dropping him dead in the mud. Order completely collapsed. British regulars, caught in a full double envelopment of artillery and precision rifle fire, began to drop by the hundreds. The field became a churning mass of red coats, thick gray smoke, and frozen mud. Within exactly 25 minutes, the entire British army broke and shattered. Soldiers threw down their muskets, falling to their knees to surrender, while others fled at a dead gallop back toward the safety of their ships. The battle was over almost as soon as it had truly begun. The casualties were almost completely absurd. The British lost over 2,000 men killed, wounded, or captured in those 25 minutes, including their top 3 commanding generals. Jackson's losses? Just 13 men dead and 39 wounded. The kill ratio is a statistic that modern military historians still double-check because it defies standard operational logic. Jackson had used his enemy's absolute arrogance as the centerpiece of his trap. He didn't try to make his ragtag militia fight like a professional European army. He gave them a protected, simple job behind an engineered wall and let the enemy's own aggressive doctrine destroy them. The profound irony of the Battle of New Orleans is that the War of 1812 had technically ended 2 weeks prior with the signing of the Treaty of Ghent in Europe, but the news had not yet crossed the Atlantic. Yet, the battle changed everything. It proved to the world that the United States could not only defend itself, but could utterly dismantle the finest military machine on Earth. It launched Andrew Jackson into legendary status, eventually propelling him all the way to the White House. The ground at Chalmette is quiet now. A simple stone monument stands in the open green grass where thousands of British veterans fell in the freezing mud. It is easy to stand there today and forget that for less than half an hour, this patch of Louisiana soil hosted one of the most lopsided, brilliantly executed defensive victories in the history of warfare.